Okay, so let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Millie's Guide to Game Design. My name is Aditya Sareen, also known as Adi, and today I'm going to be taking you through what it is to study game design, what a career in game design looks like, and overall what it is to sort of be in games. So today's agenda, going to tell you a little bit about me, where I come from, my background, how I got into games. We're going to talk a little bit about, why is it that you should uh, consider game design and why is it that I got into game design? Then what is game design specifically and what does it entail? What can you expect to learn if you go to school to study game design? What do you need to know going in and, sort of myths versus truths about game design and making games? Uh, Lastly, what are the paths forward once you're done with your education in game design and what do career opportunities look like? And then we leave a little time at the end for questions. So, a little bit about me. As I said before, my name is Adi. I'm from Mumbai in India. So, prior to uh, going into an education in game design, I came from a writing background. So, I did a lot of reading and writing. I was really, really passionate about telling stories. And before university, I had never been a game before. I had no clue what it took to make video games. All I knew was that I liked telling stories and I really, really liked playing games. And so I decided to pursue a degree in interactive entertainment at USC in 2013. Um, Before we get started, of course, my favorite games include Brutal Legend, the Halo series, Uncharted, and mostly any action adventure game. So post USC, I graduated in 2017. I worked, my first job out of university was as a game developer at India's largest IT company. And now currently for just over a year, I've been working as a technical associate at Ubisoft. And I'm working on Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time remake. So why would you want to go into game design? So firstly is for me, as I said before, I was really passionate about telling stories. And as stories go, video games were my favorite medium of telling a story, and this was mainly due to their interactive nature. The fact that you could actively have input into everything that was going on in the entire story in the game. And so this is one of the reasons why you would decide to go into game design is you like telling stories and video games as a medium of storytelling. Another reason why you could go into game design is, interactive entertainment, which is the degree that I got. It's more than just making games simply. There's a subset that go into stuff that's, very educational as well as very serious. So, educational in the sense of, maybe teaching, children how to program through playing games. And, serious games about, serious topics or, activism and, trying to convey a message through playing through someone's story. And lastly, and this comes more into physical installations of games as art. And so these are the kind of things that you would see in maybe a museum where you'd have like an interactive art installation. And of course, you like sitting in front of a computer because that's what you're going to be doing a lot. So what is game design? So at least for me, game design is the art of creating interactive fun. And what this means is that you're trying to find something that you want to make a game on, and you're trying to find out how it is that you make this fun to play for different people from different backgrounds as well as different age groups. And so you take an idea and you turn it into something playable. And so I have a couple of examples is either you take an idea of the world. And so in this case, this example is Red Dead Redemption from Rockstar Games. And this is the world of the Wild Wild West. And so you want to make a game about existing in, this world with cowboys and, the Wild Wild West and shootouts and so on and so forth. And so maybe this is an idea that you want to make a game on. Or you want to make a game on a certain mechanic. And so in this case, this game is called Control from Remedy Entertainment. And in this case, it's the mechanic of telekinesis, which is controlling objects with your mind. And so this is an idea is that, you want to pick up objects and throw them with your mind. And so you could make a game about that. Or lastly, we have the idea of a theme. And so in this case, we have Star Wars. This is Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. And in this case, you want to create a game about Star Wars. And so these examples are sort of to give you an idea of, you could take an idea of something as big as Star Wars or something as small as, just pick up an object and throw it with your mind. And these are the kind of things that you want to create a game about. And you do this through different methods, of course, is either through story, gameplay, art, and audio as well. So you could even create a game about, not making any sound at all. And so the objective is not to touch anything around you. And you take this idea and you take it from just an idea to something playable. And of course, all of these different aspects of, your story, your gameplay, and your art, they all come together into this cohesive whole. The last thing is constant collaboration. And game making is not a solo discipline. Of course, you will have projects in school where you will be working on your own, but game design and making games in general is all about working with other people. And the reason I have this on is that most people, and not all of them, of course, but most people that play games, me included, are introverts. We like to play games to sort of get into a different world and sort of escape from reality. But the reality of making games is that you're always going to be working with different people from different backgrounds, where you'll be handling one thing and they'll be handling different things. And so the important thing is, to as soon as possible get into this sort of mindset that you will always be working with different people, and you need to get used to working with people because game design and making games is all about collaboration. Now, let's say, okay, you've decided to make the step and now you decide to go to school for a game design. So, what is it that you can expect to learn when you go to school for game design? So, the first thing, of course, is design fundamentals. And so, what I mean by this is what makes a game good, what makes a game bad, what's a fun game versus what are unfun games or games that are not fun at all. You can expect to learn terms like core loops, which is the sort of action that you're going to be repeating over and over again in the game. You're going to hear terms like AAA versus indie. So AAA are your really big games made by big companies. So an example is like Call of Duty or Fortnite, and indie games which are made by a smaller group. And they're equally as fun, but maybe they try something different or try something experimental, and they're on a much smaller scale. The second thing is once you sort of learn the history and background of video games is, and what it is that it takes to make a good game, then you're going to start making games yourself. And so this is where your game making softwares will come in. So I'll go into these a little bit later. But the sort of main thing is that you'll start off making 2D games because 2D is much easier, and it sort of gives you it takes out one dimension, and it's just much easier to sort of create a lot of things in 2D versus in 3D. But of course, then you will go on to working in 3D as well. And of course, one really important aspect of game design and of going to school for video games is that you're expected to explore mediums other than video games. And the reason, I encourage everyone to do this as well is that, this is going to broaden your horizons, and this is sort of going to give you a perspective on what it is that maybe something that a film did that you could do in a game, and what is it that maybe a script, for a film did that would be really good writing for a video game instead. And so all of this is going to add to the inspiration that you're going to draw from whenever you're going to create a game. So, what is it that you need to know going into a game making education? So, obviously, this is the first myth that a lot of people, my parents included, was their sort of biggest worry was that you're going to go to school just to play games. And I'm here to tell you for sure is that it's not all about playing games. Of course, you will be expected to play games. Of course, you do have to play games if you're going to go into game design, because again, the inspiration stuff that I talked about, but it's not all about playing games. Me personally, right now, working as a game developer in the industry, when I'm actually working on a project, I barely have any time to play any games at all. So you're gonna have to get used to this fact is it's not all about playing games. You're gonna have to be working, but there will be some amount of playing games in between. Secondly, is that code and art classes are mandatory. So what I mean by this is obviously not advanced coding and not advanced art stuff. Me personally, I'm not an artist. I don't know how to create fine art, but you are expected to take intro classes on both of these aspects because going forward, you are going to be working with, let's say, a programmer or with an artist. And it is really important for you to understand the background that they come from and what it is that they'll be doing for the game so that you understand how your design for the game needs to change as a result. And so it's super important for you to take these classes to understand whether it is you are even interested in these disciplines. Maybe you take a game programming class and you realize that, okay, fine, this is something that I really want to do. But you will be expected to take at least the intro classes. Another thing, and this to me is very important personally, is patience is key. What I mean by this is I can summarize this in just two pictures. So, firstly, do not expect your game to look like this in the beginning or, possibly any stage at all. This is God of War. Uh, Very popular big game, a lot of graphics, a lot of mechanics. What you can expect your game to look like is this. And this is a picture of, the intro scene when you first start up this game engine called Unreal. It's just a mannequin, no face, no animations. There's no level. It's just a bunch of boxes around you. And, you're the one that's going to be expected to build this up to, match something like this. And why I have this over here is that, for me personally, when I first started making games, it was super, discouraging to see and to have played all of these amazing games that I loved and, wanting to create them. And then I was like, but why am I just stuck with something that, looks like what I just showed you? And, it was really, really frustrating for me personally. And why I say patience is key is that, look, like, the games that you see and most of the games that you play, especially the big budget games, those are made by hundreds and hundreds of people. And, they take hundreds and thousands of man hours to actually make. What you're going to be making is something that's, not even close to the scale of what those games are. So you should realistically expect not your game to not look like that and not to play like that. Of course, you can take inspiration from these games, but don't let the fact that your game does not play exactly like the next God of War or something like that, or look like it for that matter, discourage you in any way. Patience is key, and game making is a long process. Pure design does not exist. What I mean by this is that you can't simply expect to sit back, think of an idea. Like I said before, is you think that, okay, fine, I want to make a game in the Wild West, and think that, okay, fine, like that's it. I've done my job, and now it's up to other people to create this, and I'm just gonna sit back and relax. That that does not fly in the industry at all, and that won't fly in university either. You are expected to contribute actively to the making of a game. You can't simply come up with an idea and expect other people to work on it. You have to make a meaningful contribution to the team. And this leads me to my next point, which is you need to specialize ASAP. And what I mean by this is, there are many, many different aspects of game making, which I will go into in the next slide. But you need to find out what it is that you're good at so that you can get even better at it. Game making, like I said before, is a collaborative discipline, and one man or one woman cannot do everything. It's all about finding what it is that you're good at and how is it that you're going to contribute best to the game and just getting better and better and better at it. And I'll go over the different sort of specializations that you can get into. And the last thing, and this is what I'll get into now, is the softwares that you'll be using to make games. The first one, which most people always use, is Unity. And so this is a picture of what a game engine or your game making software looks like. And this is what, to give you an idea of what the software looks like. So if you can see my cursor, this is your window, and this is where, you're going to put all of your aspects of the game together and test your game. So for example, you have your character, you'll have the environment, and you'll have all of your assets, and this is sort of where you put everything together. And on the side is, you'll have all of your properties where you'll change certain attributes. So for example, you learn, and this is what you learn once you get into making games, is once you've sort of made something that plays and it works, then you're going to get into the more finer aspects of game design, which is stuff like balancing, and tweaking values such as how fast your character moves or how much damage its attacks do, and so on and so forth. And this is the kind of stuff that you'd be working with. So Unity, it's a free software. You can download it right now. Um, it's super easy to sort of get started with, and there are a lot of tutorials available on the Unity website as well to get you into starting to use the software and just sort of make your first game. And I would highly encourage you to check this out. You know, even before you start going to school for game design. And I wish I did, because this is the sort of stuff that you'll be working in. Like I said before, when I mentioned you'd be doing 2D first, a lot of people use Unity for 2D because it's super easy to make 2D games in, and you can use it for 3D as well. But this is sort of the first game software that you'll be working in, and this is what most university and courses use to start teaching you how to make games. Once you've had some experience with making games, then you possibly segue into Unreal. So Unreal is closer to sort of the game engine that I work in at Ubisoft. It's sort of industry standard AAA, big studio sort of game engine. As you can see, the graphics look much better. It's much more big budget, but at the same time, it is a lot more complicated to use. The sort of layout of every single game engine that you use, whether it be these openly available ones, or whether it's a proprietary game engine such as the one that I use at Ubisoft, the sort of layout is always pretty similar. You'll have like this window which shows you your game. You'd have like your assets and stuff, and then you'd have your properties on the side. And so Unreal is really good for if you're really, really trying to get into making big budget games and trying to work on commercial games, because, like I said, it's very similar to what you'd be working in if you were working in the industry at a big studio. And again, Unreal is also free to download. So again, if you are really interested, you can download it. There are tutorials available on the Epic Games website. They're the company that makes Unreal, and to get you up and started with this engine as well. So we've talked about what it is that you need to know going into an education in game design, game engines, the softwares, and everything that you'll be using. Now let's talk about the paths that you can take uh, within while you're pursuing your education. When I talked about specializing, as well as the paths that you can take going forward once you're done with university. And sort of I've separated these into three broad categories, but of course there is a lot more besides this. So your first category is art. And so what comes under art is, the first thing is your fine art. And so what I mean by fine art is, you're really good at drawing, painting. And so you could do stuff like concept art for a game, as well as, you're good with the softwares that I use to 3D softwares that I use to create, characters such as 3D Studio Max or Maya. So you're really good at modeling or rigging, and you're good at creating either 3D art or 2D art. And so that's what I mean by fine art. And you could get into the industry as a fine artist. The second is animation. Animation, again, very extremely important part of games. Everything that you see, all of the cool special moves that you see all of your characters do in a game, all of that looks that good just because of animation as well. And again, this is similar to fine art, except you're sort of out of the 2D spectrum, one to 3D, and you're used to working with 3D models and characters and character rigs as well. The last thing is technical art. And this again is sort of a new discipline that's emerging in the industry right now. And this is where you're sort of good with the more technical aspects of the art softwares, and you understand how your art softwares are going to work with your game software. So for example, you'd understand, what are the constraints of creating a character in, let's say, Maya, and how that character would then most likely function inside of the game engine such as Unreal. And you're sort of the bridge between art and the game software. Second broad category is design. So the first, of course, is level design. What I mean by level design is, you're good at taking all of the art assets that your artist makes, such as your mountains, your your ground, all of those things, your walls, everything, and you're good at sort of creating a space for the player to play inside of. And this could be either open spaces, closed spaces, rooms, open environments such as fields, all of those things. And a lot of people I've seen personally have seen, in that are good at level design also come from architectural backgrounds. So if you are in that sort of discipline, I would encourage you to look at level design as well. The second is narrative and systems design. And so narrative, again, I think is pretty self-explanatory. It's about, you're sort of designing the story of the game as well as designing how the story is experienced by a player in your game. So like maybe you walk forward and at that exact moment a boulder is going to fall on your player, and it's going to lead to like a whole dialogue sequence or something like that taking place. And so you're the one that's designing all of the key story moments and beats that the player needs to experience going through your game. The second is systems design. So this comes into stuff like, you're designing the way that your player is going to progress through the game. And so maybe at the beginning, your player doesn't have any sort of abilities, no special abilities or powers or anything like that. And then at the end of the game, you've given your player all of the special abilities and powers. And so you're going to be the one who's in charge of, constructing that progression path that the player needs to take. How is it that the player will evolve and, as they play through the game. And the last thing, and again, this is something new that's emerging in the industry now, is technical design. And sort of this is what I personally do at Ubisoft and what I've been doing for the past couple of years as well. And so this is sort of a bridge between both art and programming as well as design. So what technical design does is that, you take stuff like a game mechanic such as uh, the one that I talked about earlier, which was, telekinesis, where you pick up something with your mind and throw it, and you sort of come up with the way that this is going to be experienced by a player, as well as you're the one that's capable of prototyping this. And so technical design is super important because there are a lot of things that take a lot of time to make, and you're the one that needs to be in charge of saying whether or not this is going to work or whether or not this is not going to work. Because let's say you came up with this mechanic and you start doing it, and your artist made, a bunch of art and animations, and your programmer programmed all of the stuff that needs to go in, like the physics and stuff like that. And then sort of a couple of months down, you decide that, oh my God, this is not working. We have to scrap this. And so instead of wasting all of that time and effort that everyone put into this, you're the one that's capable of prototyping this yourself to say that, okay, this is going to work or this is not going to work. And this is the path that we should follow. And of course, the last discipline is programming, super important as well. The first is gameplay programming. So it's pretty similar to technical design, except gameplay programming deals with actual pure code. I'm not a programmer, I don't deal with code. Um, and gameplay programming is again programming certain aspects of your game. So for example, if you're talking about a game like Spider-Man, you're the one that's going to code, the web shooting out of Spider-Man's hand, attaching to a building, and then talk about how the physics and stuff like that is going to work. Engine programming is more of the back end kind of stuff. And so this is where you're going to be creating tools for other people to use. So for example, let's say your game has boxes inside of it, just a simple box, right? And you have so many levels inside of the game where you need to place boxes like everywhere. Like an artist needs to go in and place boxes everywhere. Now you don't want that artist taking that one box and continuously copy pasting it everywhere across the game. And so you create a tool for an artist to say that, okay, I want like 4 boxes inside of this level and randomly place them somewhere or something like that. And so these are the kind of tools, backend tools that you will be creating for, someone else that's working inside of the front end. And then the last is generalist. And, this is sort of, you come from a programming background, you're good with code, you know your way around different programming languages. And so you're comfortable either working in the front end or the back end, and you can sort of contribute in any way that's necessary. Now, of course, I divided these into 3 broad disciplines, but there's a lot beyond this as well. There's stuff that I haven't even covered in this, which is stuff like audio. And audio, again, very important part of the game, because the way that everything sounds in the game is just going to add on to how a player is going to be experiencing the game. There's also stuff like VFX, and maybe that could come under art as well, where you're the one that's going to design how a fireball or something like that looks inside of the game, and how it's going to draw the path of the fireball and those kind of things. But this was just a sort of overall gist of what it is to have an education in game design, what you would need to know to go in, and what you need to know going forward as well. And of course, I want to thank Millie for providing me as well as everyone else the opportunity to give this webinar, because these are the kind of things that I wished I knew before I went into game design. And sort of these were the things that I wanted to convey to everyone inside of this talk as well. And so thank you to Millie for that. And now I'm going to open it up for some questions. What's your least favorite part of your job? Well, um, I wouldn't say I have a least favorite part of my job. If I did, I certainly wouldn't be making games. The reason I make games is because I love every aspect of everything I do. There are frustrating parts, and I would say the most frustrating parts is when you're trying to make something work and it just refuses to work. And personally, to me, like I said, before, patience, was a virtue that I had to develop going into university. And this was something that still to this day I'm working on, is trying to make everything work just the correct way, but at the same time, if something goes wrong, to not get frustrated and just keep at it. All right, thank you everyone for coming to this talk, and